Prologue. In the warm, sun-kissed waters of the Abyssinian Sea, nestled off the southwestern coast of Hammerfell, lies the island of Stros M'Kai. Known for its bustling port, its rich history, and its towering cliffs, Stros M'Kai has long been a crossroads of trade between the continents of Tamriel. The island is a place of rugged beauty, with its shores washed by azure waters and its landscapes dotted with ancient ruins, telling tales of both Redguard warriors and seafaring adventurers. Stros M'Kai was once the staging ground of a legendary uprising, led by Cyrus the Restless, a Redguard hero who liberated the island from the oppressive rule of the Septim Empire's governor in the late years of the Second Era. His legacy lives on in the hearts of the island's people, symbolizing defiance and the will to reclaim one's destiny. But now, a new shadow has fallen over the island, threatening to eclipse even Cyrus's legacy. 2 years have passed since the Battlespire was freed from the grip of the Daedra, and the dark influence of Jagar Tharn, the imperial usurper who had once imprisoned Emperor Uriel Septimus VII. Tharn, thought to be vanquished, had been cast into the void of oblivion by the eternal champion, Talon Warhaft II, at the cost of his own life. Yet, unknown to many, forces darker than Tharn had begun to stir, conspiring in the shadowy corners of Tamriel. At the heart of this new evil was a sinister cult known as the Order of the Worm, led by none other than Mannimarco, the king of worms and the most powerful necromancer Tamriel had ever seen. Mannimarco, a worshipper of Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of domination and enslavement, had long sought a way to pierce the veil between oblivion and Nirn, seeking power beyond even his immortal grasp. It was Mannimarco and his worm cult who found a way to pull Jagar Tharn from the depths of oblivion, their dark rituals resurrecting him in secret. Now, strengthened by the powers he had learned in his time in Oblivion, Tharn sought to regain control, and his eyes were set on the strategically vital island of Stros M'Kai. With its history of rebellion and its valuable position as a maritime hub, the island would be the perfect foothold for Tharn's plans to begin his new conquest of Tamriel. Serana, once a soldier in the service of the Empire and one of the few survivors of the Battlespire ordeal, had thought her days of war and darkness were behind her. She had returned to the Imperial City after the events of the Battlespire, haunted by the memories of her fallen comrades, particularly Talon, the eternal champion who had sacrificed himself to defeat Tharn. Serana had been decorated for her bravery and was given a position of honor within the Emperor's inner circle. But now, 2 years later, the nightmares had returned. Whispers of Tharn's name spread through the Empire like a plague, and there were disturbing reports of increased Daedric activity and mysterious disappearances on the island of Stros M'Kai. Emperor Uriel Septim Sept himself had summoned Serana to the Imperial Palace, entrusting her with a mission that would once again plunge her into the heart of darkness. The island of Stros M'Kai is in grave danger, the Emperor had told her, his voice heavy with concern. Jagar Tharn has returned, and we believe he has allied with Mannimarco, the king of worms. They are raising an army in the name of Molag Bal, and they must be stopped before their darkness spreads further. Serana, bound by duty and haunted by the sacrifices made during her last encounter with Tharn, had no choice but to answer the Emperor's call. She would return to the battlefield, this time as the leader of a new Imperial force, to confront Jagar Tharn once more and end his reign of terror before it could spread beyond the shores of Stros M'Kai. As she sailed toward the island, the weight of her mission pressed upon her shoulders. Stros M'Kai, the land of Cyrus the Restless, would become the final battleground in a war that had begun years ago. But this time Serana vowed she would not fail. The fate of Tamriel rested in her hands. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. The salty wind tugged at the sails of the Imperial ship as it sliced through the shimmering waters of the Abyssinian Sea. Serana stood on the deck, her eyes fixed on the approaching outline of Stros M'Kai. The island's jagged cliffs loomed ahead, sharp and imposing against the sunlit sky. But as the ship drew closer, something felt wrong. What should have been a bustling port was eerily quiet. Where are the Redguards? Serana murmured, narrowing her eyes as the port came into view. The streets of Port Hunding were almost deserted. Normally, this time of day would be filled with merchants, sailors, and the sounds of dock workers going about their business. Now, there was only silence. The Emperor's words echoed in her mind. Tharn has returned, and with him, an army of darkness. Serana's hand instinctively tightened around the hilt of her sword. She could feel it, a growing tension in the air, the kind that precedes a storm. A small crew of Imperial soldiers accompanied her, their armor glinting in the sunlight, though their expressions mirrored Serana's unease. Among them were Captain Valen, a seasoned Redguard officer who had been stationed in Stros Makai before the upheaval, and Alakir, a young mage from the College of Whispers. They were both competent, but Serana could see the doubt in their eyes. "The island feels cursed," Alakir muttered under his breath, glancing at the deserted port. "I can sense the magicka in the air. There's something unnatural." Serana nodded. "Stay on your guard," she ordered. "We'll disembark and head for the governor's palace. We need answers." As the crew prepared to dock, a shrill horn suddenly echoed from the cliffs above. Serana's heart leapt. Figures began to appear on the cliffside, dark shapes clad in black robes, figures that could only belong to the Order of the Worm. "Get down!" Captain Valen shouted as arrows rained down from above. The soldiers scrambled for cover as a wave of cultists descended upon the docks. The clash of steel filled the air as Serana led her troops into the fray. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Jagar Tharn, the once Imperial battle mage, who had once tricked an empire and held the Emperor captive, now looked aged beyond his years, his once dark hair streaked with gray. His robes were even blacker than before, a symbol of the shadowy alliance he had forged with the Daedric prince Molagbal. Tharn's expression was grim, his eyes burning with a hatred that stretched beyond mere conquest. He raised his hand, and a pulse of dark magic sent soldiers flying backward. Tharn's cruel laughter echoed across the battlefield as Serana gripped her sword tightly. She had faced him before in the battle spire, but now Tharn seemed different, stronger, darker. With a sharp inhale, Serana charged, her sword raised high. But just as she reached the battlefield's center, a blast of energy knocked her off her feet. The ground beneath her seemed to vanish, and the world spun in a blur of memories and time. Flashback, 4 centuries earlier. The streets of Port Hunding had been just as quiet then, but for different reasons. It was the Second Era, and a young Cyrus the Restless stood on the very same dock, staring out at the ships. His long, flowing red scarf whipped in the wind, a stark contrast to the somber expression on his face. He had returned to Stros Makai not as a hero, but as a man on a mission. His sister, Isara, had gone missing, last seen defying the imperial occupation of the island. Though Cyrus had once fled his homeland, his loyalty to his family had never waned. As he walked the streets, memories flooded back, memories of his rebellious youth, of the time before the empire had taken hold. He had heard whispers of a rebellion, rumors of his sister's involvement. But now, as he made his way through the city, Cyrus could feel the weight of the occupation, a heavy imperial presence looming over everything. He reached the tavern where he had been told to meet an old friend. Inside, the smell of salt and ale hung in the air, and at a corner table sat the man he sought, Basil, a sailor with more connections than most. "Cyrus," Basil greeted with a nod, sliding a drink across the table. "Heard you've come back for blood." "I've come back for my sister," Cyrus corrected, sitting down. His voice was sharp, his eyes focused. "Tell me where she is." Basil leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The Empire has her locked up tight in the palace dungeon. She was part of a rebel group, wanted to drive the Imperials out, reclaim the island, but she got caught." Cyrus clenched his fists. "Then I'll break her out." "It won't be easy," Basil warned. "They've fortified the palace since the uprising. They're watching every move." Cyrus grinned, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "I've never been one to play it safe." In the days that followed, Cyrus infiltrated the palace, cutting his way through Imperial guards and navigating the treacherous underbelly of the city. He faced traps, Imperial legions, and conspirators. But through sheer determination and a desire to save his sister, Cyrus reached the heart of the Imperial stronghold. There he found Isara, weakened but defiant, her eyes filled with the same fiery spirit Cyrus had always admired. Together, they staged one of the greatest escapes in the island's history, setting in motion the events that would lead to the fall of the imperial rule in Stros-M'Kai. The rebellion that followed would become legend, with Cyrus leading the charge, rallying the people of Stros-M'Kai to freedom. The island was liberated, and Cyrus became a hero, the Restless, a name that echoed across Tamriel. Present day. Serana snapped back to reality as the clash of swords rang out around her. The memory of Cyrus's defiance still echoed in her mind. He had fought for his sister, for his homeland. Now, centuries later, she stood on the same island, facing a new threat. A threat that could not be vanquished by rebellion alone. But Serana would fight, just as Cyrus had. She would face Jagar Tharn, no matter the cost. For Tamriel, for the Empire, and for the memory of the heroes who had come before her. The battle for Stros-M'Kai had begun. Chapter 2: Shadows of the Past. 1 month had passed since Serana and her soldiers had pushed back Jagar Tharn's cultists in the battle for Port Hunding. The days since had been filled with skirmishes and bloodshed, and although they had made some gains, the weight of the war was beginning to take its toll. Manamarco's influence stretched far and deep, and the cult of the worm was growing more dangerous with every passing day. Stros-M'Kai had always been a land of conflict, but now it felt like a land on the brink of ruin. As Serana marched through the narrow streets, her eyes sharp and wary, she felt the weariness creeping into her bones. Her remaining companions, Captain Valen and Alakir, marched with her, their determination unyielding even as they bore the scars of their recent battles. "The palace is just ahead," Valen said, his voice gravely with fatigue. "We've lost too many. Tharn's forces are thinning us out." Serana's eyes narrowed as she glanced toward the massive stone structure in the distance, the seat of power on the island. "Then we make every strike count." Alakir grunted in agreement. "We won't let them get away with what they've done to this place." As they neared a ridge overlooking the palace, Alakir's pace slowed, his eyes squinting into the distance. Serana noticed his hesitation and turned to him. "What is it? There?" Alakir pointed to the far side of the valley below. A lone figure was moving through the distant landscape. Cloaked in white robes that seemed to shimmer under the midday sun, the figure moved gracefully, almost unnaturally, across the rocky terrain. "Do you see him?" Serana followed his gaze and caught a glimpse of the figure. From such a distance, it was impossible to make out any details, but the stark whiteness of the robes stood out against the dark earth. The figure paused, as if sensing their attention, then turned and disappeared behind a ridge. "Who could that be?" Valen asked, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his blade. Serana frowned. "I don't know, but we don't have time to find out." "Do you think it could be one of Tharn's men?" Alakir asked, still staring at the ridge where the figure had vanished. "If it is, they're bold, walking around like that," Serana replied. "But we need to stay focused. The palace is our goal." Reluctantly, Alakir nodded, and the group continued their march. But the image of the figure in white robes lingered in Serana's mind, a strange omen of things to come. Flashback. The rebellion of Stros-M'Kai. A month had passed since Cyrus the Restless had freed his sister, Izara, from the grip of the Imperials. The streets of Stros-M'Kai were alive with rebellion, and the island was on the edge of open war. Cyrus had become the face of the resistance, but the shadow of the Empire loomed large. The Redguards were fierce warriors, proud of their heritage, and they were ready to die to free their home. Cyrus, with his keen tactical mind and unmatched swordsmanship, led them with fire in his heart. His sister Isara had become the heart of the rebellion, her voice carrying the cries for freedom across the island. Today, Cyrus stood in the shadows of the palace. A month had passed since they had first begun their open rebellion against the Empire, and the final battle was nearing. With Sarathra, his Khajiit ally, by his side, he surveyed the palace grounds, noting the Imperial guards that patrolled the walls. "They've fortified the entrances," Sarathra observed, his tail twitching as he adjusted his weapons. "They are ready for us, yes?" Cyrus grinned, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Let them be ready. It won't make a difference." Sarathra's eyes gleamed with amusement. You have a way of turning impossible odds in your favor, yes? That's why they call me Restless, Cyrus said with a wink. As they began to discuss their plan of attack, Izara joined them, her expression one of steely determination. The people are ready. We will storm the palace at dawn. Cyrus nodded. We take the palace and we take the island. Izara's voice was firm. For our people. For Stros Makai. The rebellion was in full force, and the battle that would shape the future of the island was about to begin. Back in the present, Serana's heart ached as the echoes of the past faded from her mind. The weight of history pressed down on her. The city of Stros Makai had always been a place of struggle, and now it was her turn to lead the fight. As the palace loomed closer, Serana's resolve solidified. Jagar Tharn may have returned from oblivion, but she would not let him or his dark master, Manamarco, claim this island. This time, it was her battle to fight, her legacy to forge. With her sword in hand, Serana led her soldiers toward the heart of the enemy's stronghold. Chapter 3: The White Wandering One. Serana and her companions pressed on through the winding streets of Stros Makai, tension hanging thick in the air. After catching a glimpse of the mysterious figure in white, curiosity gnawed at them, igniting a desire for answers. They had to confront this enigmatic presence. As they approached a secluded clearing, the figure emerged from the shadows. Dressed in glistening white robes that seemed to radiate an otherworldly light, he stood tall and confident, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding them. In his hand was a staff, glimmering with a brilliant blue orb at its tip, unlike anything they had seen before. The design was symmetrical and serene, exuding an aura of peace that felt almost disarming. Serana glanced at Valen and Alakir, determination sparking in her eyes. We can't let him get away. Without hesitation, they drew their weapons. Valen nocked an arrow, while Alakir conjured flames in his palms. Serana focused her own energy, feeling the crackle of magic ready to unleash. They attacked in unison, arrows whistling through the air and fireballs streaking toward the figure. But the man in white merely raised his staff, and with a fluid motion, he deflected the attacks. The blue orb shimmered, absorbing the arrows and fire, turning their energy into harmless sparks that danced around him like fireflies. He stepped forward, seemingly unbothered by their aggression, and the very air around him shimmered with power. What is he? Alakir gasped, his eyes wide in disbelief. Serana couldn't help but feel a strange familiarity. Get ready for anything, she warned. With a swift flick of the staff, the man redirected a blast of ice magic that Alakir had sent his way, sending it crashing harmlessly into the ground behind him. The figure's laughter echoed through the clearing, rich and warm. You are not the first to challenge me, and you certainly won't be the last. As he drew closer, his features became clearer. An older man with a thick beard that had streaks of gray amidst black, he bore the marks of a long and storied life. Recognition flooded through Serana as she stepped forward, disbelief etching her features. Talon? Talon Warhalf II, yes, he replied, his eyes sparkling with mischief. The Eternal Champion is what they also used to call me. It's been a millennia since I've seen you all. So long I almost forgot what you looked like. He paused, glancing around at the bewildered faces. Well, I don't really know any of you, except Serana, but whatever. Talon, Serana stammered. We thought you were gone. Talon chuckled, waving his hand dismissively. Oh, I was. I fought the beast of fire and ash. I don't remember much. I remember I fought the beast from the tallest and brightest heights of Aetherius to the lowest and darkest depths of oblivion, all the way to the emptiness of Mundus. When I slew the beast of fire, I remember seeing a bright light. His demeanor shifted, becoming more serious. But for now, you may call me Talon the White. The staff I wield is now known as the Staff of Balance. He spun the staff playfully, the blue orb pulsing with light. Serana shook her head in disbelief. But how? Why are you here? Simple. Talon grinned, his enthusiasm infectious. I heard the call of chaos. Jagar Tharn has returned, and with him, the potential for great upheaval. I intend to stop it. Serana exchanged glances with Valen and Alakir, the weight of their previous struggles mingling with hope. If Talon had returned, perhaps they had a chance to turn the tide against Tharn and Manamarco. Come on then, let's go, Talon urged, motioning for them to follow him. There's much to be done. As they fell in line behind Talon the White, Serana felt a renewed sense of purpose swell within her. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but with allies like Talon by their side, they might just reclaim them home from the clutches of darkness. Slack, the restless journey. The sun hung low over Strasmakai, casting long shadows on the golden sands. A figure moved through the bustling port, his eyes scanning the crowd with urgency. He was a man on a mission, driven by the shadows of the past. Cyrus, the restless, had come seeking answers. His sister had been taken, a captive of the treacherous forces lurking in the shadows. He remembered the day clearly, the tension in the air, the betrayal that had fractured their family. His heart raced as he recalled the whispers of dark magic that had permeated their lives. With each step, he felt the weight of history upon him. The island held memories of lost kin and ancient battles, but now he sought to right the wrongs of the past. He approached a tavern, the flickering lanterns illuminating faces both familiar and foreign. Inside, a shadowy figure beckoned him to a corner booth. "Cyrus, you've come for her," the figure said, voice low and conspiratorial. "You know what must be done." "I'll stop at nothing," Cyrus vowed, determination igniting his spirit. The path ahead would be fraught with danger, but he had faced darkness before. The spirits of his ancestors would guide him as they had always done. Chapter 4, Echoes of the Past. Flashback. The Sword of the Dwemer. Cyrus moved cautiously through the ancient Dwemer ruins, the air thick with a palpable energy. He gripped the hilt of a magnificent sword, its blade glimmering with a light that felt both alive and powerful. The weapon had responded to him, floating and pulsing as if it had a will of its own. "This is it," he whispered, feeling the weight of destiny upon him. "With you, we can end Manamarco's tyranny." But the sword, though silent, shimmered with urgency. It sensed the encroaching darkness and the peril that loomed ahead. As Cyrus ventured deeper into the ruins, he felt a chill in the air, a warning that something was amiss. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A figure emerged from the shadows. Manamarco, cloaked in darkness, a wicked smile twisting his lips. "Ah, Cyrus, how noble of you to think you could wield such power. But you're too late." Cyrus felt a surge of dread. "You're here for the sword, aren't you?" "Not just for the sword, dear Cyrus," Manamarco said, stepping closer. "I have bigger plans for Strosmkai, and you are simply in my way." Before Cyrus could react, Manamarco raised his hand, summoning a torrent of necromantic energy that struck Cyrus like a bolt of lightning. Pain radiated through him, but he managed to hold the sword steady, its light flickering in response to his distress. "Fool," Manamarco sneered. "Your rebellion ends here. I made a deal with the imperial nobles seeking to control this land, but he was not fit to rule, so I took matters into my own hands." He gestured dismissively, and the shadows coalesced around him. Cyrus fought back, his determination unwavering. "I won't let you destroy everything we fought for." But as the battle raged, the sword began to dim, its light flickering as if it were losing hope. In a final, desperate attempt, Cyrus lunged at Manamarco, but the dark sorcerer countered with a wave of his hand, unleashing a wave of energy that tore through Cyrus's defenses. The last thing he saw was the sword's light fading as he collapsed to the ground, his vision dimming to black. End flashback. Serana jolted awake, the remnants of the dream clinging to her mind. The chilling truth washed over her. Cyrus was dead. The sword, imbued with the soul of a Dwemer, had not just been a weapon, but a tragic symbol of hope extinguished by Manamarco's treachery. Sitting up, she felt the weight of the past pressing heavily on her. 8 months had passed since they last saw Talon the White, who had vanished without a trace. The loss of Cyrus, coupled with the absence of their champion, deepened her resolve. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, determination igniting within her. The memory of the sword haunted her thoughts. It was their only hope against Manamarco. If it had a weakness, they could exploit it. Stepping out of her room, Serana found Valen and Alakir in the common area, their expressions drawn with concern. "You're up," Valen exclaimed, his relief palpable. "We were starting to worry." "I had a dream," Serana said, her voice steady. It was about Cyrus. He found a sword, a powerful weapon that can move and float, but it's also tied to Manamarco. It was there when he died. Alakir frowned. Manamarco killed him? Yes, and he made a deal to eliminate the noble who sought to take control of Stras Makai. This sword, it could still hold the key to defeating Manamarco. Valen exchanged glances with Alakir, hope flickering in his eyes. Then we need to find it. If it has a weakness against Manamarco, we must seize that chance. Serana nodded, a surge of urgency propelling her forward. But first, we need to figure out where the sword is hidden. Time is running out, and we can't let Manamarco regain his strength. As they began to strategize, the gravity of their mission settled upon them. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but Serana felt a renewed determination. They would seek the sword, and with it, they would stand against the darkness, threatening to consume Stras Makai once more. Chapter 5. The Final Stand. 6 months had passed since Serana's haunting dream of Cyrus, and the burden of loss weighed heavily on her and her companions. They had scoured the rugged coastline of Stros Makai for any trace of the legendary sword, their last hope against Manamarco's encroaching darkness. Each day felt longer, each failed lead a reminder of their desperation. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting an orange glow over the churning sea as they stood on the cliffs. Tension crackled in the air, thick and suffocating. Maybe it was just a myth, Alakir suggested, his voice heavy with doubt. What if the sword is lost to us forever? No, Serana snapped, determination lacing her words. We owe it to Cyrus and everyone to keep fighting. We can't let Manamarco win. Valen, his brow furrowed, gazed at the tumultuous waves. But what if we're too late? He's gaining power every day. Suddenly, a deep, resonant horn echoed across the water, capturing their attention. Serana's heart raced as she turned to the sea, where a ship emerged, sails billowing majestically. Standing atop the deck was a familiar figure. Talon, she exclaimed, a spark of hope igniting within her. Your savior is here, Talon proclaimed, striking a heroic pose, only to trip over his own feet. He stumbled, but laughed it off, attempting once more to look intimidating. Manamarco's mocking laughter rang out, slicing through the tension. Look at your so-called savior, a fool tripping over his own hubris. As if fate were playing a cruel joke, the horizon darkened with the approach of not just one ship, but 300, all bearing the imperial insignia. Serana gasped, her heart swelling with renewed determination. The Empire is coming! Talon raised his staff, a triumphant grin lighting up his face. Now we fight for what is right. With a rallying cry, the Emperor stepped forward, clad in gleaming armor. We fight for our people, for Stros Makai. The tide of battle surged forward as the Imperial soldiers charged ashore, weapons drawn, their spirits bolstered by the sight of reinforcements. Serana felt adrenaline course through her as she joined her comrades, plunging into the fray. The clash of steel filled the air, spells crackled, and chaos reigned as the two forces collided. Serana fought fiercely, her blade dancing through the tumult. Alakir and Valen were at her side, their friendship a beacon of strength amidst the chaos. But as the battle raged on, the weight of Manamarco's dark forces became evident. His mages unleashed torrents of shadowy magic, cutting down waves of soldiers. Serana's heart sank as she realized their numbers were dwindling. Glancing at her friends, she could see the weariness etched on their faces. We need to find the sword, Serana shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. They fought through the throng, pushing forward in search of the legendary weapon. But Manamarco materialized before them, dark energy radiating from his very being. You think you can challenge me without your precious sword? In that moment, despair threatened to engulf them. Serana felt history repeating itself, echoes of Cyrus's fate reverberating in her mind. The air crackled with defeat, heavy and oppressive. She glanced at her companions, battered and bruised, each weary breath a testament to their struggle. Just as the darkness seemed insurmountable, a horn blew once more, louder and more resonant than before. Serana's head snapped up, her heart racing as she beheld the flagship approaching. Talon stood proudly on the deck, staff raised high, flanked by the Emperor. Your savior is here, Talon bellowed, igniting a flicker of hope among the Imperial forces. With a commanding presence, the Emperor advanced, his voice echoing across the battlefield. We fight for our home, for Stros Makai. The tide began to shift as the Imperial soldiers surged forward, invigorated by the fall of their dark adversary. Serana felt a rush of relief. Her spirit lifted as they pressed into the fray once more. In the heart of the battle, Talon finally faced Mannimarco. "This ends today," Talon shouted, determination blazing in his eyes. "You think you can defeat me?" Mannimarco sneered, darkness swirling around him. The two clashed with a fury that sent shockwaves through the battlefield, their weapons sparking with magic. As the fight intensified, Serana pushed through the chaos, her heart racing as she sought her friends. The battlefield was a whirlwind of violence, each clash a reminder of what was at stake. But just as it seemed all hope was lost, Talon unleashed a devastating blow. With fierce determination, he plunged his weapon into Mannimarco's side, a moment of clarity breaking through the chaos. "You will not claim this land," Talon roared, and with a swift motion, he severed Mannimarco's head from his shoulders. The dark mage fell lifeless to the ground, disbelief etched on his face as his dark power dissipated into the air. A moment of silence engulfed the battlefield, then erupted into a deafening roar from the Imperial forces. "Victory!" they cried, their spirits ignited as they pressed forward, reclaiming their land. Serana felt a wave of relief wash over her as she reunited with Valen and Alakir. They had fought for their future, for the land they loved, and for the legacy of those who had come before them. With the remnants of Mannimarco's army in retreat, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of crimson and gold. Serana stood with her friends, triumphant yet weary, knowing they had faced the darkness together and emerged victorious. The final battle had been fought, and with it, a new dawn for Stros M'Kai began, filled with promise and possibility. Epilogue. The sun rose over Stros M'Kai, casting a warm golden light across the landscape, illuminating the scars left by the recent battle. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and the distant chatter of townsfolk rebuilding their lives. The remnants of war were still visible, but hope bloomed like flowers after a storm. Serana stood on the balcony of the newly restored Imperial Palace, looking out over the bustling harbor. She could see fishermen setting out to sea, children playing along the shore, and families gathering to share stories of their survival. The resilience of the people filled her heart with joy. "Things are starting to feel normal again," Alakir said, joining her on the balcony. He leaned against the railing, a smile breaking through his usual stoicism. "It's good to see our home healing." Valen approached, his hands full of small trinkets and gifts from the grateful citizens. "You won't believe how many people want to thank us," he said, grinning. "I had to convince them we didn't need a statue in our honor." Serana chuckled, her spirit lifted by the camaraderie among them. "We fought for them, not for statues," she replied, turning to face her friends. "But their gratitude is appreciated." As they stood together, the doors swung open, and the Emperor strode in, clad in simpler robes now, no longer the imposing figure of command, but a friend and leader. "I just met with the council," he announced. "Plans are underway to restore Stros M'Kai to its former glory, and I want each of you to help shape its future." Talon entered behind the Emperor, looking more vibrant than ever, his presence filled with warmth and light. "I'd say we earned a little rest after that last fight," he said, a playful grin on his face. "But if you need us, you know where to find us." The Emperor nodded, a serious expression crossing his face. "Your roles in this rebuilding are crucial. We will face challenges ahead, but with each of you by my side, I know we will prevail." Days turned into weeks, and the trio of Serana, Alakir, and Valen found themselves immersed in the revitalization of their homeland. They traveled throughout the region, listening to the needs of the people and working tirelessly to restore not just the land, but also the community spirit that had been fractured. One afternoon, they gathered in the town square, where a festival was underway to celebrate their victory. Colorful banners danced in the breeze, and the sounds of music and laughter filled the air. The townspeople had set up stalls filled with food, crafts, and handmade goods, creating an atmosphere of joy. As Serana stood watching the festivities, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Alakir and Valen were caught up in a lively game of tug-of-war with a group of children, their laughter echoing like music. "Look at them," Serana said, smiling as she watched her friends. This is what we fought for. Indeed, Talon replied, appearing at her side. This is just the beginning. There's still much to be done, but for now, let's enjoy the moment. As night fell, the sky erupted into a dazzling display of fireworks, illuminating the faces of the townsfolk. The celebration reached its peak, and Serana felt a sense of belonging she had longed for. In that moment, surrounded by friends and the people she loved, Serana knew that they had triumphed over darkness. They had fought against overwhelming odds and emerged stronger than ever. Together, they would forge a new path for Stros Mackay, a path filled with hope, unity, and resilience. As the fireworks lit up the night sky, Serana whispered a silent promise to her fallen friends, including Cyrus, that they would always be remembered. Their legacy would live on, not just in the tales of valor, but in the hearts of those who remained. And so, under the light of 1,000 stars, a new dawn rose over Stros Mackay, a testament to the strength and power of hope.